Well, I had the story where this young man had experienced several different um, attempts at finding truth, and he had looked at this type of religion and that type of religion and this type of denomination and that type of denomination and this book and that book and YouTube and so many things, man. And then it was, I believe, the providence of God that we would meet and someone who is mutual to us. Um, I would be in the area preaching a gospel meeting, and they said, "Hey, we'd like you to talk to our friend. He's going to be in town. He's going to be preaching. We'd like you to talk to him." And that's a pretty good. I think I'll finish it later.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you got a good story there going, and a good start to the episode. What tell us your name, where you're from, and interesting fact.
Sure. My name is Eric Garner. I am from Chattanooga, Tennessee. I am married to my lovely wife for almost 20 years. It'll be this year. Delwana, two lovely daughters, Ayana and Leilani. And just an interesting fact, I am a high school administrator, and I'm also a gospel preacher. And so many people just ask me, how in the world do you do it? But the way that the American public education system works, the schedules work really well with my speaking engagements. So I'm pretty much only in school during the day, 5 days a week, off summer, some regards, holidays and uh, spring breaks, fall breaks, and so all of those things work really well with my schedule.
Good man. So you're like dual productive,
Yeah.
kingdom and as administrator in the school. So that's awesome. So tell us a little bit, like, as you know, in the show we have strategies, right? So we want to do
Mhm.
real strategies people can take away when they listen today and go, hey, I can do that. So what are like we usually do like three strategies. What are three strategies that you find to be effective in sharing the gospel?
Sure. First, I want to make sure that when we're considering or attempting to be better evangelists, because I know that that title sometimes is held by those who hold down pulpits, but we're all evangelists. We should all be preaching and teaching the truth of the gospel to lost souls. And I would tell you, don't minimize the power of prayer. Um, every day, I have structured prayers for my days. So my prayers on Tuesdays are different than Mondays and Wednesdays. So I have structured prayers, and that works good for me. But I always pray for the opportunity to share the gospel, and don't minimize that. Don't overlook it. Paul prayed for open door, Colossians 4:30. Right? Jesus Jesus discussed the different types of soil, Matthew 13, 1 through 23. Paul prayed for boldness. And he wanted boldness. First Corinthians 2, 1 through 5, the apostles. I'm mindful of Acts 4:29. They prayed for God to grant them boldness. And so the first strategy is do not minimize the power of prayer. Ask God, God, please put one, two, three. You don't want to be overwhelmed, but maybe put one person in my life this week. And Lord, please let them be good soil. All right, let them be good soil and let them be receptive to the truth. And Father, give me the boldness, to speak when those opportunities rise. Well, that's the first strategy. The second one would be now I stated to pray for opportunities, but we know that in life it really doesn't matter what aspect of it is, whether it's secular or spiritual. Opportunities really only come to the prepared. Hey,
Yep.
let's just be honest. And and so we have to make sure that we are prepared so that when God does answer that prayer, we can actually take advantage of the opportunity. So we do have to know this. We don't have to be able to quote Genesis chapter 1 to Revelation 22, right? We don't have to be able to quote the whole Bible. But we do need to be prepared in a way that we've studied, that we can clearly and concisely explain the gospel. Paul, we know these passages. 2 Timothy 2:15, study to show thyself approved. 1 Peter 3:15, be ready always. And so we know these passages. But here's what I would tell you to do in order to prepare. right? You don't, because oftentimes we become mediocre at a lot of stuff and we're not great at any one thing. I would tell you to become great at the simple gospel. Just become great at that. Just know the who, what, when, where, how, why of the gospel. Know that the gospel is God's power to save. Romans 1:16. Know that, right? You need to be able to tell people that's how God saves, is through the gospel. Know that the gospel is something that is not abstract in the sense that you can't attach something to it, but it's spiritual. So you can't hold it or you can't touch it, but it's also not abstract. So it's not something that someone's just formulated in their mind or some ideal. The gospel must be obeyed, right? It must be heard, it must be obeyed. So we know that it's something. And so be able to know that the gospel is something, and that something is the death, the burial, and the resurrection of Jesus. 1 Corinthians 15, 1-5. And these are ways that you can simply show people in the Bible. Here's the gospel. It saves. Here's what it is. The 1 Corinthians 15, 1-4. And if I don't obey it, 2 Thessalonians chapter 1, verses 7-9, then Paul says that Jesus Christ with his mighty angels is going to take vengeance on anyone who doesn't know him and doesn't obey the gospel. And so that's pretty important. So if the gospel saves, Romans 1:16, and it's the death, burial, and resurrection, 1 Corinthians 15, 1-5, and in order to escape the wrath of Christ, I've got to obey it, 2 Thessalonians chapter 1, verse 7-9. Well, then now you take them through the process of how to obey it. And I'm very scripted, Titus. I'm very scripted. I'm so scripted with my evangelism, you would think it was just an organic conversation. But it's so scripted. Like I've practiced and practiced and practiced, and it's scripted. And no matter who I talk to, no matter what their faith is, no matter what their denomination is, I can bring them to the gospel. And here's the beautiful thing, Titus. I never mentioned church.
Yeah.
I stay scripted on salvation. And so number one, pray. Number two, prepare. But finally, as once you conduct the study, you set up the study, you conduct it. I always try to get people in very neutral areas. I don't do a whole lot of, and listen, right or wrong, it is what it is. I don't do a whole lot of inviting to church. I'm not saying that I won't, but it's my last resort. It's my last resort. If I can't get the sit down study, like if I just can't get them to sit down with me personally, then I'll invite them. But typically I don't invite people because they're going to sit in the audience. They're going to hear me preach at them. Right? They're going to sit there and hear me preach, and it's just not an intimate time to where we can have discussion and open-ended questions and dialogue. So I typically don't invite. That's my very last resource. And so I prepare. And finally, here's my last one. All right, here's my third one. Make sure that if at all possible, you can leave an open door for a revisit. I guess you're just not always going to, if the parable of the sower holds true, Jesus had a 25% conversion rate. All right. I mean, so we just know that not everyone's going to accept it. Jeremiah understands what that's like. Just not everyone's going to accept it, but leave his friends. I always think about 2 Timothy 2:23. When things become foolish or things become contentious or the discussion is being heated, a good time to stop it. I just don't keep pressing. Just stop it. Try to find another time you can revisit, but always leave his friends. I try to make that. And I'll try to make that a personal mission. When I leave this conversation, no matter what differences we have, no matter how much this person is fault, no matter what the reservations are, I want to leave his friends.
Well, that's good because I think if you don't leave the open door, then they won't come back, but they could come back and talk to you if you keep it positive,
Absolutely.
So you got pray, prepare, and then do that open door, prep the soil, you might say, if we want to use the P's. And then,
Absolutely.
well, and I always talk to people, so many Christians, and I would put it in quotation marks, argue, argue, argue. And there's just not enough Christians, obviously. If you took all people who said they were Christians, it's still not enough people. There's still like billions of people who are not Christians. So you gotta, don't, like you were saying, don't take so much time. You just don't cast those pearls before swine. Essentially just say, look, I've done all I can do here. There's a lot more people who want to hear it, right?
Absolutely.
That's good. So tell us what happened in that story, man.
So so I meet this young man. He, Titus, you it's where I've seen this in my studies. I've seen people who are so zealous to know truth, and it's just not someone who wants to obey the gospel just so they can see, what the church is going to do for them, or see can somebody pay a bill, or this, that, and the other. And I don't know if you've ever experienced that, but we experience that a lot, in certain areas, in certain cities, and with certain demographics. As far as neighborhood types and socioeconomic status and things of that nature. But you can when you've got that genuine good soil that's really seeking, knocking, and asking. And we know what Jesus said in Matthew 7:7. Jesus said, anybody that's seeking, it shall be given to them. If you knock, the door's going to be open. They ask, they're going to receive. If they seek, they're going to find. And so you have that good soul, and you're just like, man, okay, this is a great candidate. So I met this young man, and he was extremely zealous to try to find what was right and what was true. And so that was a very, very good study for me. We met, and we talked just for a few moments, and we exchanged numbers. And so he contacted me. We talked and we talked, we emailed, we text, we talked, we studied, and we studied. And Titus, what I did, because he had gone through so many, which of these is right? Is it Baptist? Is it Presbyterian? Is it Methodist? Is it Catholic? Is it Hindu? Is it, Hebrew Israelitism? Is it, Islam? I mean, he had gone through the gambit, right? And I'm just like, man, he's inundated with a ton of false information. So just using my plan, I said, okay, I understand that he has really overwhelmed himself with information. So I just simply talked to him and led him through the gospel. And it was simply about salvation. I made it about salvation. I didn't make it about any one group. I didn't make it about any one belief. I simply made it about salvation. Do you believe that there's something after this? Right? Yeah, I believe that's why I've been searching. I'm searching. I do believe. Okay. And then we started talking, and I really just, it took me. I wasn't able to use my scripted process immediately, but I finally got him there. I finally got him to where, okay, now I can teach him the gospel. And man, he is one of the most faithful Christians you want to
Nice.
see right now.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
That's awesome. Well, so it took, you never know. You never
right.
know who you run into. And you were ready. So you had probably prayed about it. You probably
Absolutely.
prepared for it. And you would have left an open door if he was arguing with you, probably.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
do you have another story possibly
I
coming to
do.
mind?
I do. I
Okay.
do. This one's interesting. I was thinking about two of them, Titus, and I actually wanted to talk about one because I don't have success all the time. Like, first of all, I just want to put that out there.
Yeah.
More jump off the line than stay with me. I'll just be honest. Jesus said, "I'll make you fishers of men," and he was not kidding. More jump off the line than stay, and I'm subject to it. So number one, don't be discouraged. All right, don't
Right.
be discouraged. You know, even if no one accepts it, you've simply done what God asked you to do. God said, "You catch them, I'll clean them." God didn't tell me to save anyone, right? He just told me to preach the word, and that's all I do. So I want to tell you about this one story that that wasn't successful. I think it was successful, but so we're in Belize, and we're doing a mission trip in Belize, and we're helping a church there. We're doing a vacation Bible school for the neighborhood children during the day, and I'm preaching a gospel meeting at night during rainy season. So if you understand anything about the tropics and rain, it's crazy. So I'm doing a gospel meeting at night, and we're doing a vacation Bible school for kids during the day. And in between, but the vacation Bible school and the gospel meeting, we're evangelizing. We're knocking doors. We're walking around. We're inviting people. And I mean, and they're receptive. They're coming. Right? They're coming. I mean, it's amazing. Well, we're staying in this. We're staying in this. It's supposed to be a like one of the top scale hotels there. Yeah. So you, so we're staying in a hotel. There's a gentleman there, Titus, that um he sees us. He comes down to our breakfast because we're getting ready. We're at the hotel during breakfast during the day, and then we have to walk to the church building and get VBS. So we're down and doing breakfast. He comes down. He's a white gentleman, and he comes down. He says, and he's English, and so he says, "Hey, what are you guys doing?" You know, I was like, "Hey, man, we're doing a gospel meeting, and we're here evangelizing. We're here working. We're from the States, and we're here just trying to teach people about Jesus, man. Just trying to save some souls." He's like, "That's interesting, man." He said, "I don't believe in God." I said, "You don't?" He said, "No, I don't believe in God." He said, "But listen," he said, "I'm not one of those people." He said, "Hey, he said, whatever you need to do to make it through this life," he said, "I'm fine with that." So, so I said, "Okay, that's fair." And we had to leave, and I told him, I said, "Well, maybe we'll meet up again." And he was like, "Surely." As Providence will have it, I was sitting getting some food between our door knocking, and once we complete our door knocking, we had rest time before the gospel meeting. So I was in the middle of the rest time. I was going to get me something to eat at the restaurant at the hotel because that's pretty much the only place we could eat. So he comes up to me. He says, "Hey man, how you doing?" I was like, "Hey buddy, what's going on, man?" He said, "Oh, nothing much." He said, "You got time to talk?" "Yeah, sure, man, sure." He said, "Prove to me that your God exists."
Hmm.
And so now we have an hour-long Bible study,
Yeah.
right, about whether or not my God exists. And it was an interesting, I mean, when we finished the discussion, he told me, and by the way, I said all that to bring you to this point. He ended up being very high in FIFA. He was there training the Belizean the national soccer team. I had no
Mm.
clue who this guy was.
Yeah.
And so I Googled him, and I couldn't believe it. His name was Stephen Constantine. If you want to Google that gentleman, he's very high in FIFA. And so at the end of the study, and here's why I'm so glad I was prepared, because I couldn't use. He would have, if I tried to use the Bible to prove the Bible, he was gonna blame me for using circular reasoning, and that he doesn't believe in the Bible. So I already knew that. So I said, okay, I'm gonna have to use some apologetics or some Christian evidences. And so I end up using the moral argument, and end up using Hitler and the Holocaust. And he told me, he said, "I've lived in 21 countries. I've seen every religion you can pretty much think of." He said, "I've seen the atrocities that religion has caused to this world." He said, "And I have talked to rabbis, priests, imams." He said, I've talked to everybody, and I've asked them the same question I asked you. Prove to me that your God is God and that it exists." He said, "I will tell you this, while I still don't believe," he said, "you have been the most compelling argument that I've had." So he gave me his card. He said, "I would like to continue this discussion." And he gave me his card. It was pretty awesome.
That is awesome. And FIFA, if anybody doesn't know, is like the for soccer, like a big international soccer organization. But yeah, that is so cool, man. And you never know who you're going to talk to, do you? In the middle of Belize, the middle of a restaurant, you never know.
Right. It was it
And
was
you
it
told
was
him.
pretty awesome once I saw who he was. I was like, man, this guy's somebody. I didn't know that.
Well, you were also telling about somebody, the savior of the world, right? That's who we
Absolutely.
represent. So like those are awesome stories, man. Thanks for sharing. Do you know like at this time we like to take people, they've got some stories, they got some strategies. Now let's give them some encouragement about to get out there, right? Like you said, fishing. You cannot catch a fish if you don't put your line in the water. You got to cast that line, right? You might not catch one, but you got to cast it. So that's what's some call to action here for everybody listening.
Um, Jeremiah, you know what I love about our God. I teach, golly man, I teach countless people, obviously in mass, because I am a gospel preacher, and I've taught so many classes and so many lectureships and so many conferences and so many gospel meetings around the country. And I've been blessed in that. I really have. I've gotten to meet Christians I never would have met until glory. But but here's my encouragement. God never hides the imperfections of his people. I love that. I love it. God doesn't hide the imperfections of Moses. He didn't hide the imperfections of Abraham. He didn't hide the imperfections of Cain. He didn't hide the imperfections of David. I mean, he didn't hide the imperfections of Peter or Paul, right? God shows us that he can use imperfect people, and he does. He uses imperfect people to accomplish his perfect will. And so what I want to encourage you is that always when I talk to people about evangelism, I always use Jeremiah. If commentators are correct, and I'm not one, if commentators are correct, Jeremiah was called by God somewhere between the age of 12 17. It just depends on just depends on who you're studying, who you're referring to. Somewhere between 12 17 to preach to a whole nation that Babylon was coming in. He did this for several years, right? For decades. He did this for a few decades. He preaches to these people. Nobody repents. Like nobody repents. Like nobody. We consider Jeremiah 20 verse 9. He tells God, you deceived me, right? I'm in derision daily. People are laughing at me. They're putting hits on my life. They throw them in miry pits. I'm the prophet of gloom and doom. And he said he was not ever going to speak or teach in God's name anymore. You can ask 100 Christians if Jeremiah was a great prophet, and 100 Christians will say absolutely. I don't know one Christian that's like, man, Jeremiah wasn't successful, man. I don't know that he was a good prophet, right? We all consider him to be one of the greatest prophets of the Old Testament, but nobody repented at his preaching. But what makes Jeremiah so great was his consistency and his pursuit to do it, no matter how his personal feelings may have been. Jeremiah was going to do it. He was going to preach, and when then the ball was in their court. And just like Samuel told God, when God said, they haven't rejected you, they've rejected me. Don't take it personal. Don't ever take evangelism personal. Right? How can it be wrong? There's a story of Penn and Teller, and I don't know the story myself, but it's circulated everywhere that the famous magician duo Penn and Teller, like one of them's an atheist, and he just was stating that he loves when people come up to him and teach the Bible. Now, again, I'm regurgitating this. This is secondhand information. I haven't seen the story, but he loves when people come up to him and talk to him about his religion, because even though he's an atheist and he doesn't believe, he's just like, how much do you have to hate a person to not share a message with them that you believe can save their soul? He's like, how much do you have to hate a person? So he appreciates when people come up and share their faith with him. He's like, I love it. So just be encouraged to be that soul winner. Right? Proverbs 11:28. Be the soul 28 through 30. Be the soul winner. Be encouraged and do it.
Do it, man. Do it. Get out there and do it. That's the key. Like take one step. I think Jesus was faced with being murdered on the cross when he started, and he could have easily just said, it's a little too hard, man. A little too hard. But he kept going. So I think as our inspiration.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Because I know if it had been me, I probably would have called those 72,000 angels. I probably.
That's especially when they're like spitting you and hitting you and all that stuff. You think you're so great, that stuff.
Yeah. Like, Lord, go ahead and send them.
Yeah, send them down, man. Send them down. Yeah, that's good. Awesome. Well, so listening to I appreciate you, Eric, being on the show, and especially these stories that you're out there. I think the encouraging thing we can tell people, just get up. Like, don't stay down. Like, Satan's going to take you down. He's going to take you down, and so you'll fall sometimes, but just get back up.
And that's why in those two stories, I wanted to give one of success and one of not. And I do, again, want to encourage people. I have more nots. I promise. I have more nots than I have more no's than I do yeses. But that's with anything in life. People are reserved, right? It takes people a moment to accept something new, right? Yeah, none of us just take the first time. I didn't obey the gospel the first time. I heard it. It took me about 4 years. But from the time I heard it to the time I obeyed, I didn't convert immediately.
Well, and we just plant seeds, right? Not every seed's going to grow or turn into a giant tree, but we just plant seeds. It's pretty easy. I don't know if anybody's ever planted a seed before, but here's how you do it. I'll show you. You get the seed, you put it in the soil, and then water it, stuff like that. So, hey, I appreciate you, Eric. Everybody listening, get out there, be encouraged that, hey, if you don't fail, you haven't tried, right?
Absolutely.
That's it. So get out there and talk to people and show them the love, because as Penn or Teller said, can you really say you love people if you don't tell them about what will save their soul? And that's what his point was. So get out there and tell people because you love them.
You've been listening to Be Brave. The world right now is a crazy place, and sharing the love of God is the most important thing we can do right now. We hope you've enjoyed the show. Make sure to like, rate, and review. And we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hit up gobebrave.org. Remember, the love of God is the most powerful force in the universe. Learn how to love like Jesus. See you next time.